Today we're going to make these beautiful paper hearts, and they're made entirely from recycled and upcycled papers. And they're probably things you already have in your own home. We're going to use old sewing patterns to make ruffled edges. We'll use some recipe pages and some music paper. Let's get started. The first thing that you want to do is gather all of your supplies. I like to gather a lot of supplies, whether I use them all or not, doesn't matter, but I like to have them at my fingertips. So the first thing I'm showing you here is the paper that I recently picked up at a thrift store. Now this is scrapbooking paper. The first two sheets I had there are on the lighter side. The second two are kind of a heavier weight. I also have some pink tissue paper. You can use any color. And then I have an old sewing pattern that's made out of tissue paper. Now you can get those at thrift stores. A lot of them are used and in pieces or ones you've made. Another thing that you want to find is old book pages. Now this is one that I picked up years ago at a book sale for like $1. Pages are missing, they're falling apart. Of course you don't want to use anything that is in good condition. You don't want to ruin any books or any sheet music or anything like that, or even recipe books. But when you have ones that are damaged or headed for the trash, those are the items that you're going to want to use. Another thing that's nice to have is old maps. A lot of them become obsolete over the years. Years and years ago, my dad had a subscription to National Geographic magazine, which is notorious for having a bazillion maps in the pages, and of course I saved them all. This next item is a pink fancy kind of yarn material. I'm not a knitter, so I'm not sure exactly what you would call it, but I also got that at the thrift store. I have some acrylic paints, and I have some of these glitter and pearl kind of glue paints. I've had those forever. And then of course I have some regular glitter. I chose a crystally white and then a really pale pink. Not sure which I'll use yet, but I also have my Mod Podge and a craft brush to apply that with. I also gathered together some scrapbooking scissors that have different designs along the blades, so they cut fancy edges like pinking shears, and I also have my regular craft scissors. So now that I have amassed all of the materials that I possibly could use, I'm going to start to go through them and narrow them down to the pieces that I want to put into my hearts. So I'm going to go through the pages of this book. I know there were some that were falling out, and I take a look at it. I want to make sure it doesn't say anything in the words that would go against a Valentine. So I find one, it looks pretty good, and then I can set the book aside and move on to the next one. And I do the same thing with the music book. There were a few pages that were falling out and torn, and I'll take one of those and I'll put that into my Valentine as well. A lot of these items you can find not just at thrift stores, but book sales, flea markets. In a town near me, they have a giant recycling center, and people take piles of books there. They actually have a giant bin just for books, and I see people all the time when I drive by digging through there because they're looking for things. People collect magazines or certain kinds of books, and I don't have something like that in my town, and I've never personally gone to that one, but I know that's an option if you're looking for old discarded books. Now, I also pulled a page from a recipe book. It had some pink designs on it, so I thought that'll match my Valentine. And then for a little contrast, I thought, well, maybe we'll use a piece of map that has some nice blue and some tan and beige colors on it. So I pulled that aside as well, and then realized on the other side it had even a brighter design. So that's an option too. The first thing I'm going to want to do is choose the paper that is going to be the background largest size heart, because we're going to be layering hearts that have like graduated sizes. So I'm going to use the heavier cardstock for my largest heart, and then you can see like that music sheet page is small, so that'll have to be for one of the smaller hearts. So I'm going to take my large cardstock sheet and I'm going to fold it in half, and just like we did in grade school, I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to sketch half of a heart. It doesn't have to be perfect. Try to make it on the large size because you want to have enough space for all the other hearts that are going to be inside of it, kind of like pages of a book. So I'm going to sketch out the bottom like half of a V shape and go up and make a big curve at the top like you're drawing the letter C, and just do it in pencil. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's going to be the back of the Valentine. And I folded it so what I want showing on the front is inside, so it doesn't matter if you get pencil marks on it, and you can cut those away with scissors anyway. So I'm going to eyeball it and adjust it if I need to, and then I'm going to take my regular craft scissors, and following my line, I'm going to cut out that heart. And once you have it cut out and you open it up and look at it, you'll see if you like the shape. And then from there, you can adjust it. Sometimes my hearts tend to be very puffy at the top, and I end up cutting them down a little bit. And that's exactly what I decided to do with this one. I grabbed my ruler and I thought maybe 1/4 of an inch smaller will do it. And I just folded it back up, took my pencil and just eyeballed it, made a little line, and then I didn't even draw it out. I'm just going to follow it along with my scissors and do my best to try to keep it even. And I cut away a little bit more at the puffy top part, like I said. And looking at it again, I'm pretty happy with that. And that's going to be our guide for all of our other hearts. So every one that we cut out after this is going to be a little bit smaller, at least 1/4 inch or so. You can do it how you like. If you want to make them, even, a greater difference in size between each one, you can. So for my next paper, I'm going to choose something that has a little bit of a contrast. So I'm going with a smaller patterned paper. And again, this is a heavier cardstock. And what I'm going to do is fold that heart back up again, place it on there, and I'm going to trace like where this heart is so that I know to cut the next one smaller. And also when you're tracing your papers, I'm starting at like the very bottom of the paper so that I can have, scraps left over from the top part. You don't want to put the heart like right in the middle if you're going to have scrap. You want to save like the biggest pieces that you can, so you can have, it for another project instead of having lots of scraps everywhere. So I'm just going to sketch inside about 1/4 inch or so, maybe a little bit more. And then I'm just going to take my craft scissors again and cut out the second heart. And you can see I did it kind of quickly. I'm not really fussing too much. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can fuss more if you like. That's absolutely fine. And I'm going to hold it up inside my first heart, and I'm going to see if I'm happy with that. So you can see how I wanted the bottom heart to like stick out a little bit underneath the top one. And that's the idea for every heart that we're going to add. So I decided to take one of my fancy scrapbooking scissors and give it a fancier edge. What I want is each one to be a little different than the next. So, one can have a plain edge, the next one may have like a scalloped or fancy edge, and later on we'll put some glitter on there, and it's going to make a nice variety. So again, I'm working my way around the edge of the heart with those scissors, and when I'm all finished, I'm going to open it up and check it out and make sure it's nice and even. And I have a couple stray ends I'm pulling off there, and I'm going to hold that again up against the other heart, and I really like that. So we're going to move into the next heart, and this is the lighter weight scrapbooking paper. Again, this is some stuff I scored at the thrift store, and again, I have 2 pages. I'm just holding them together, folding them in half once again, and again tracing another heart. And I'm cutting these together because it's easier to cut out 2 at a time, and then later I can just cut one down. I might not even decide to use both of those papers, but I'll use them in some project if I don't use them in this one. Now to cut these out, I just chose a different fancy edged scrapbooking scissor that's different than the one I used the last time. And just going around and cutting inside of my drawn line. And then, like I said, we'll open it up, check it out, see if we like it. I really love this pink gingham plaid. I know that gingham's been really popular this year. You see it a lot in home decor, in craft items, and it also looks great with like the floral papers. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, just going around trimming it again until it's the size that I'm happy with. So I'll set that aside with my other hearts, and we will move on to the recipe page. I'm going to fold this in half again, and I'm going to try to find a part on the page that has a little bit of color. You know, if there's a specific design on a book page or a magazine page, you want to try to center that somehow in your heart. And I just wanted to get a part with a recipe and a little bit of that pink on. So once again, tracing and cutting out. You may have one or two of these vintage cookbooks laying around. Maybe it was handed down to you. Let me tell you, some of the recipes, they're pretty interesting, especially the ones from the 50s and 60s. There sure are a lot of recipes using gelatin molds and vegetables together. But they're definitely fun to look at. So now moving on, we're going to use the music page and tracing again, cutting out, and that's going to be the center or the last heart that is going to be in the middle of our Valentine paper heart decoration. And once again, just like I do with the book pages, I'm going to take a look at the music lyrics, and I'm going to make sure, because this is for a Valentine, I'm going to make sure it doesn't have any lyrics for like a funeral song or anything like that. And that's just my personal preference. So that's our center heart, and we can put them all together, and I think they look pretty great. So now we're going to move on to the next part, which is pretty fun. What we're going to do is we're going to grab our tissue paper, and you can use, like I said, regular tissue paper. If you have old sewing patterns that are ready for the trash or you're not going to use, that that are obsolete, you can use those as well. And you can keep it folded up a couple times, and you're going to just want to take your regular craft scissors and you're going to cut a few strips. I cut my strips to be about 1 inch wide, maybe 1.5 at the most. So you want to make sure that they're as long as you can get them. So you don't want little short pieces. You want to try to get pieces that are about at least 12 inches long, and later I'll show you how we connect them. So we're going to separate them, open them up, get your sewing machine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the presser foot and I'm going to scrunch up the very beginning edge and then put my presser foot back down. And you're going to want to stitch slowly because you're going to need to scrunch and feed the strip of paper in while you're stitching. So you don't want to go really fast. You're not going to have time to, make those little scrunches or pleats. If you were to fold it over, it would be a pleat. So I'm just, like I always say, no rhyme or reason, just squishing it in there, going slowly till you get into a rhythm and you get used to it. And you can go a little faster then. And you can use whatever color thread you like. I have just white in there, so I went with that. And you're not going to see that the way we're going to be using it in this heart, so the thread color doesn't really matter. Once you finish one, you're going to very carefully, at the end, you're going to lift your presser foot up again, very carefully, pull it out, snip your threads, and then you can do the next. And you can see how pretty that is. You can use that for all different types of crafts. So I made some of the pink ones. I made some with the tan pattern paper. And I also altered the stitching on a few of them. That one that I'm doing right there, I did the stitching kind of toward the left side. Some of them most of them I actually just sewed right down the center of it. But you can get different effects by doing it. You can do tighter scrunches, you can do looser ones. And this one I'm showing you where one ends. I just kind of stop and then put another one over it so that they'll be connected together. And you have to be very gentle. You don't want to tear the paper. And for this one, I did a layering of both. I did pink on the tan, and that's a different look too. So here they all are. There's the pink ones I made and the tan ones, and there's the one with the two color, and I think they all got really cute. So what would you use these for? I always love to hear fresh ideas, so if you have one, make sure you leave a comment below and share it with us. There's the one where I stitched toward the side. You can see it kind of gives it a curve. And so I'm going to use the long one that I pieced together to go around the edges of my heart. First I took a look to see what the pink would look like. It's pretty, but I really prefer the tan. It has that like tea-stained vintage look, and look how pretty that is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we're going to attach that to the back of our main large heart using some Mod Podge and a craft paintbrush. And you can use regular Elmer's glue. As a matter of fact, I couldn't find my white glue and I had the Mod Podge right there. And since it's tissue paper, it's so thin, it's gonna glue right on there. So using my craft brush, you can see I just dipped in, went around the edge, and the placement, the way I'm placing it on is I'm hiding the stitch behind the heart. So from the front side, you will only see the ruffle. See, there's the front. And so with the back, when you put it on, you know, if you want, you can put it higher so you can see the stitching. I just like the stitching hidden behind the back. And I'm going to continue around doing about 3 or 4 inches at a time because it's manageable then. You don't want your adhesive to dry too quickly, and you want to take your time and just press it on with your fingers and it glues right down. Basic white glue such as Elmer's glue works perfect for this. Mod Podge works as well. I would not use a hot glue gun, and I would not use a heavier, thicker adhesive like a rubber cement kind of thing. You want something very light and very thin, and just a thin coating of this works great. And you're going to apply it about 1/2 inch to 1 inch from the edge of your heart in toward the center. You don't need to cover the whole back of the heart. We will do that later on. So continue to work around, and when you get to a point or into a curve, you know, you just take your time and then bend it as you need to. Every once in a while, I like to flip it over and look at it and kind of gauge my progress. I want to make sure that the ruffle is relatively kind of like the same, sticking out the same amount or the same length around the whole heart. So I try to get it on pretty evenly. That's why when you're stitching, you want to try to stay in the center of the strip. And you don't want your strips to be kind of wonky where one end is very narrow and the other end is very wide, because again, then you'll have a ruffle that looks uneven. So continue to go around the back of your heart, applying your adhesive, you know, gently pressing down. And if you use too much adhesive, you know, you're going to make the tissue paper wet. It's going to saturate it and go through it, and it could tear. So find that happy medium of using just enough, and you know, a nice thin coat will do. And like I said, press it on with your fingers, and then I'll go over the entire heart with my hands and make sure that all of the pieces are pressed down. If I have any pieces of tissue paper that are really like uneven or extra like clumpy in the back, just take your scissors, I'll cut them right off. And what I'll do to finish it off is we'll take more Mod Podge, and we're going to go over all of the tissue paper that is not showing around the edge. So we're going to kind of glue that down to the back of the heart, and that's going to just make it so it's, you know, kind of flat. And then we're going to set that aside to dry. And while our ruffled heart is drying, now is the perfect opportunity to add a little bit of sparkle and a little bit of glitter to the hearts that are going to be in the center of it. So I'm going to just choose one of my little glitter glues. They have a very fine nozzle, so you don't even need to use a paintbrush. You can if you want to, but I'm just going to squeeze a little bit out all the way around one of the edges, and I'm using that lighter gingham plaid heart, and it'll give a little bit of contrast. I wouldn't put like a dark glitter on a dark heart. You know, you want it to have a little variation, a little bit of variety. So just carefully going around the edge. You don't need to use a lot. A little bit goes a long way. And once I finish that off, I'm just using actually the tip of the nozzle to like connect my little lines on there. You don't even need, like I said, you don't even need a paintbrush. And then you're going to just set that aside to dry as well. For the heart that had the recipe on it, I decided to use a little bit of glitter. So I'm going to use Mod Podge as my adhesive, and you know, working in little sections, put a little bit of Mod Podge down just around the edge, and I'm going to put a piece of newspaper below the heart to sprinkle the glitter on. That way we can reuse our leftovers. Once my ruffled heart was dry, I decided I wanted to add a piece of that fancy pink yarn to serve as a hanger. And what I did was I just cut a length of it of about 10 inches, and I tied the two ends together, and then the loop end that did not have the tie, put the tie at the top, I put against the right side of my ruffled heart, and I put my presser foot down on my sewing machine, and very carefully I just put a few stitches in front and back, and that secured that on there very well. So you'll see you want to very carefully pull that out. You don't want to tear anything. Snip it off with your scissors. And if you need a couple more stitches, you can do that. And then the only thing left that we have to do is to line up all of our hearts onto the base heart, and we're going to stitch them all together. So line them up nice and even, make sure they're in position right where you want them. Put your presser foot down, carefully put some stitches in. I go straight down the center. Now we, folded those papers in half, so you kind of have a guideline, and you can go right down where that fold was in the center of your heart. And just one nice line of stitches right down the center will do it. Now, if you don't have a sewing machine, you possibly could stitch this by hand if you had needle and thread. I think that might be difficult to do. Another option that you could do is you could actually glue them together. This is definitely probably the simplest way, just a line of stitches down the center, and it's a really pretty effect. It also allows your hearts to have that 3D effect, like pages of a book, where it opens up a little bit and you can see what's beneath the next one and what's beneath the next one. So here I'm taking my scissor and I'm just cutting off the ends of the thread from the sewing machine. So to cover up the back, we want to make the back look pretty too. I'm using the book page, and I am just folding it in half and eyeballing it and cutting out a heart shape. On the reverse side of my heart, you can see all the stitching I did when I sewed on that pink string to hang it from. And, we want to cover that up. So I cut out my heart. It did a pretty good job. It looks like it fits right on there. And, you don't have to be precisely exact the same, size as your base heart. If your heart's a little too large, you can just trim it down. And then you're going to take the reverse side and you're going to give it a coating of adhesive, either white glue or like I'm using Mod Podge. And you want like a medium-sized coating, nothing too thick and gloppy and nothing too thin, because you want it to adhere to where we glued all those ruffles down. So give that a nice even coat. Try to get all the way to the edges. Don't miss any spots. And then what you're going to do is you're going to flip that over and very carefully line it up to the back of the heart, and make sure all your ruffles are going the right direction, that you don't glue any down that you don't mean to around the edge, and center it as best as you can, and then use your hands to just gently press it down. And go all over the entire thing. You don't want it to peel away. You want it to be firmly glued down. And you can also take like a heavy book and put that on top just to help it press down if you like, and then just set that aside to dry. Now once it's dry, your heart's pretty much finished, but of course I had one last idea. I pulled out my gold metal leaf, which is it's just a gold colored leaf, and I have a metal leaf adhesive, and I only use real gold like for jewelry. I don't use that for like regular craft projects, but this gold colored metal leaf works great for paper projects and other craft projects. And again, grabbing my craft paintbrush, all you're going to do is squeeze a little bit of that metal leaf adhesive here and there, and I'm just going to wipe over it real quick with my brush. And you're going to be careful when you pull out your metal leaf, because it's kind of staticky. It gets everywhere. If you have a little bit of glue on your finger, it's going to stick right to you. You can use tweezers to pull off a small piece, or some people use a brush. I just like to use my hands because I use it all the time. I'm kind of used to working with it. So you're just going to pinch off a piece, and it doesn't have to be, any particular shape. You just want it to be a little bigger than the area of adhesive you put down. Press it down gently with your finger, and then I like to get a soft brush, and you want to burnish over it a little bit, and you're going to get all those loose edges, and the brush will pull those right off. And then I'll move on to another area, again putting a little bit of that adhesive down. And I haven't tried it. I've only ever used the gold leaf adhesive, but you might be able to just use Mod Podge or Elmer's glue to do this. I don't see why it wouldn't work as long as you put it very thin, because just almost like I said about the tissue paper, like if you use too much, like it'll go right through it, it'll saturate it. Well, with this leaf, if you put that on a glob of adhesive, it's just gonna like tear the leaf. It's gonna make a mess. So yeah, real quick, one little swipe of the brush to make it thin, pull a piece off, set it on with your fingers, gently press it down, and then grab that brush and burnish it down. You're just pressing it, brushing over it gently. Don't be too rough or too hard with it. And that's going to make it really shiny, and it's going to get rid of all those little extra edges. And it's just going to give your project that really pretty glimmer, and it just makes it stand out. You can apply the gold leaf to any part of your project. I only used it on like the back large heart, and every once in a while I'll stop and I'll eyeball it and I'll say, is it balanced? Is there one spot where it kind of needs a little bit of shine, or that looks a little bit bare, and then I'll use a little bit more. It's easy to go crazy with it, but it's something that like a little bit goes a long way, but the shine is just gorgeous, and it just really adds something unique to it. So here I'm looking at it and I think, well, I have a little bit up at the top, I could use a little bit. So one last time I'm going to put just a little bit more adhesive on here and there, and a little bit more of the gold leaf. And you can buy the gold leaf at basically any craft store. You can, I'm sure, get it online. I just get it at my local craft store. And I know that it comes in different colors. There's different shades of gold. There's usually like an antique gold or like a bright gold. And sometimes they have like a silver or a copper colored, maybe even like a brass color. And they're really nice for, different crafts. And, it can not peel away, but it can scrape off unless you put a coating of a sealant on top of it. Only if you're using it on something that's like a household item. You don't have to seal it on this heart or any kind of project like this. But if it's something that gets regular like wear and tear, like daily wear and tear, where you're touching it or moving it or it's bumping against other items, then you're going to want to put a sealant on it. So here's our heart. What do you think? I hope you try to make one at home. I hope you liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. I also love to hear your tips and your ideas, so please share them with us by leaving a comment below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe. Click the little bell button next to the subscribe so you can get notified when I release a new video. Again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you liked this project, and I hope you try it at home. Let us know how it goes, and I'll see you next time.